Welcome back to the 12th District, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kerry Condata. We'll be bringing you direct connection to your legislators later in the show. We have some exciting news to talk about first. Well, maybe exciting, maybe depressing, but we're going to talk about the news from Venezuela clear to Wenatchee in the next few minutes. And at the end, a special wrap-up today. I'm going to tell you something you might be surprised to hear from me, but I think a lot of you are thinking the same way right now. All right, so we'll be right back with the 12th District. All right, we're back in session in the 12th District. We'll be connecting with our legislators in just a few minutes, but first let's take a look at the political news around the world. First up today, let's talk a little bit about international. We've got a lot of things going on. We're going to be keeping a close eye in the next few weeks on Venezuela, which is a very unstable situation right now. As you know, the U.S. is influencing or putting some influence down there as there's a potential change in leadership. The country needs it. It's been in bad shape for a long time, and perhaps this will be the change they have needed. Also, China and the U.S. back at the table negotiating trade. That is a good thing. We have tentative agreements with Mexico and with Canada. Europe looks like they're on board for the most part, but we have to get China squared away, and it looks like that is going forward, although slowly, and we hopefully we'll see some results out of that. Of course, in Europe, the Brexit issue is still hanging in the wind. We'll see which way England turns. That's kind of a major thing for the economy and is probably the largest European story at this time. So we will be taking some time out and watching these international stories. Let's bring it back a little closer to home. The government shutdown has ended for at least a short period of time. We'll see what happens. It is a matter of what Congress can do in terms of negotiating an agreement on border security. Now, this has been the argument, and the wall or the no wall, and you've heard it all. But the fact is we do need border security, and we need a system that works for immigration. It's about 50 years overdue, and it is critical that this gets done. Again, there's a lot of blame going around, but the fact is it's Congress that moves this ball. And if they come to some agreement, I would assume that the president will sign it, even if there is some compromise. I think that's the reason he put the government back in gear, was to get back to the table, and that is exactly what's happening. We'll see what the results of that are. Well, last week at the end of the show, I told you about a very controversial bill in New York that allows abortion right up till the time of birth. Wow, that has opened some huge debate. That particular issue has been pretty silent for the last 15 or 20 years, but there is certainly concern from the people on the left that with the new Supreme Court in place, that Roe versus Wade could be overturned. And so it seems like an overreaction from several states, including New York, to move the ball even further, which is to allow abortion right up till the time of delivery. You probably heard some of the news clips and interviews on this. It's pretty hideous. This isn't abortion at this point, folks. It is absolute outright murder. And I think anybody that's sane would agree. So we'll see what happens. New Hampshire has followed suit. Vermont, others are doing things. Plus, some states now are trying to write bills. I find this really hypocritical that some states are writing bills to prevent Roe versus Wade from being overturned. If it was overturned by the Supreme Court, they would be taking states' rights. It's interesting the states that wanted to prevent abortion or change their abortion laws were trumped by the federal government for most people. That's the way the left particularly viewed it. And now that the shoe is on the other foot, it seems they want to reverse that and let the states protect themselves. There are a number of bills in motion to do just that. That will keep going for some time, I am sure. All right, let's move on. Also, presidential candidates are lining up, particularly from the Democrats, and they're all trying to out-left the other. They are moving so hard to the left, it's almost unbelievable. I think this abortion move is just one of many things that is coming from the far left, and it seems like the Democratic Party has moved to that position. We'll talk more about that later. But there is more than enough candidates, and they all seem to be running on this very far left position. They include Medicaid or Medicare for All, which is a single-payer health care system. That seems to be the focus point of a lot of these folks. This is a system, all you have to do is look at the current Postal Service or Amtrak or any other major government bureaucracy, including the Veterans Health Care, to see that this isn't a good idea. It was scored recently by a number of folks to cost $32 trillion, that's with a T, $32 trillion over 10 years. And although a lot of these folks are screaming and yelling for single-payer health care or government health care, there's not a one that's come up with how they're going to pay for it. And that question just seems to go unanswered. We'll see how that works out in the long run. Major taxes on the rich are another issue that seems to be at the top of the list for these folks. That is a 70% plus tax rate. Or one candidate's gone so far as to say we have to confiscate some of these assets. Another one, who is not a candidate but a new superstar of the Democrat Party, says that why should the rich be able to have things like helicopters? Is that right for people to have money and to be able to own helicopters and nice things like that and boats and oh my gosh, it's just out of hand, but it's out there and that's where they're moving. Free tuition for all, that's another one that's a really big push right now. It's free tuition at all the institutions throughout the United States, or at least most of them. Once again, same problem. Nobody has come up with how they're going to pay for that. Now, the Republicans in Washington State did something about high tuitions. We reduced them by almost 20%. I think they should be reduced further, so I do agree with the fact that they are overpriced, particularly our larger institutions like WSU and UW, who have a lot of investments and a lot of income. They could certainly reduce their tuitions even further and still do a good job. But free tuition, the cost of that is probably not quite as astronomical as healthcare, but certainly not something that would be easy to pay for. Now, with all these folks running hard to the left and harder to the left and trying to out-left the others, there is one Democrat who is actually standing out separately, has changed his positions a bit, but still Democrat-based, and that is Howard Schultz of Starbucks fame. Howard Schultz has said now that the party has moved too far left. I think he was considering running in the primary for a Democrat position, but he is getting a lot of attention now because he has said he will probably run as an independent. He is out working the media side right now. He's getting a lot of pushback from the left because they're terrified that he actually makes sense. He actually is pretty moderate, and he has put down the tax on the wealthy. He has put down the Medicaid, Medicare for all. He does not believe free tuition is the right way to go. The guy's actually sounding like a soft Republican in some circles, but the left is threatening to boycott Starbucks, even though he's not really connected, not directly. But they are really upset that this gentleman could come into the fray and really shake the cart. Well, I think that's true. I think he is a contender after listening to several interviews, and I think he will really change the approach that we all have going into 2020. He might be the most viable third candidate since Perot. All right, let's take it back a little closer to home. We've looked across the United States at what's going on. It's going to be a very exciting political year all the way through this year and into next year. Of course, we're going to have our legislators up just shortly. And one of the subjects they're going to talk about is kind of near and dear to my heart because I served 10 years on the Labor Committee. And this week there was a hearing that really dazzled folks. It actually dazzled the press. It's gotten more coverage than probably anything I've seen in Olympia in the first 3 weeks. This is where the hairstylists really mobilized, showed up to testify against a bill that would basically outlaw them from being independent contractors. This is where the hairstylist rents a chair in a salon and then becomes his own business person, just simply pays the rent and collects his own money. And this is a very popular option for hairstylists. And of course, the labor folks on the labor side are trying to eliminate that. Now, there's a little background to this. It goes way beyond, and you're going to hear our legislators repeat this for you. But the fact is, it goes beyond hairstylists. This is about destroying the independent contractor. This is about removing the independent contractor and getting everybody back on the payroll, back on L&I, back on unemployment insurance, so those funds can be increased, and also so the benefits from those funds can be increased dramatically. They've had trouble moving that ball forward in the last few years because the funds are not in good shape. The unemployment fund is in reasonably good shape, but the L&I fund has been struggling to get back to a good reserve position. So this is a move against the likes of Federal Express. It goes against home builders and a lot of others, but I think they thought they could pick off the low fruit on the tree by going after hairstylists. I think they were wrong. Senator Karen Kaiser had all she could handle with these folks. and I'm not so sure this bill is going to go anywhere. That tells you what can happen when people get engaged, and I hope that you will take on that type of attitude. If anything that comes along that certainly affects your profession or what you do for a living, I hope you'll be in Olympia because it really works. The hairstylist did a great idea. Of course, the other controversial bills being heard in Olympia were the gun control bills. There are 4 bills on the table dealing with a number of different things, including 3D printing of guns, including magazines. We're back to this 10-round magazine issue, which really doesn't do much, but it's just a chipping away at the block. We've proven time and time again that these are not effective bills for gun control, and there will be a lot of pushback, I can assure you. But again, Democrats in clear control could move some of these along. We still haven't had resolution from the initiative that passed, Initiative 1639, which has at least 2 to 3 lawsuits against it, and that probably won't be resolved till later this year. So that issue is not going away, and I can tell you from my response here in the 12th District, it's one of the most serious issues for the folks here who are very, very proud gun owners and obviously very safe, because we have a very secure 12th District, even with a very large number of guns being owned. I think it's for the very reason that's why we're safe. All right, well, we're going to come back and talk to your state legislators from Olympia and see, beyond hairstylists and guns, what else is going on. We'll be right back with the 12th District in session. Welcome back to the 12th District, ladies and gentlemen. We have a direct connection to our legislators in Olympia. We're going to hear what's happening in the legislature from Mike Steele and Keith Gaynor. Welcome aboard, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, tell us what's happening in your lives this week in Olympia. Who came and visited, what the committees were like, and any exciting news that is coming out of the legislature.
Well, it continues to be a really busy week, a really busy session, obviously. In education, just Tuesday, we heard from the mother of a child that she lost at the Sandy Hook mass shootings, and she walked us through her suggestions for improving school safety in Washington State. And the biggest piece that came out of that was threat assessments, understanding what threats the schools really do have, and then regional networks that connect these schools together and connect law enforcement, the school administration, and the school itself. Is the most successful system she's seen in reducing the potential of gun violence in these schools.
And from my perspective, the biggest things probably happened in the Transportation Committee, where we had presentations again from the ferry system and also the high-speed rail, the rail people were in. And it's interesting that they're talking about making some major changes, big dollar amount changes. And the biggest issue that you hear from the Secretary of Transportation is that preservation is probably highest on the list. And we do need to make sure that we adequately fund the preservation of the current infrastructure before we make commitments to things that are a little more speculative.
Well, that's a fact. That's good to hear, because we fought that for years and years with the preservation side getting the short end of the stick. So that's good news. Any more talk, Keith, about the carbon tax or any of the gas tax or any of the revenue side of that situation?
Not in the transportation side. I know they had the conversation about the carbon and the energy side, but it really hasn't been. We haven't talked really about revenues. We've asked questions about what are potential tabs on some of the projects that are being put before us, but we haven't really talked about how we're going to generate the revenue to cover them.
I'm sure that will come along soon enough. One of the more controversial hearings this week was, I think there was a number of bills on gun control, various gun control issues. I know that Jim Walsh had a bill from the Republican side that was interesting, a privacy bill that had some overtones to gun registration and that type of thing. Can you tell us a little bit about the gun bills, what you think the chances are of them passing, and what Jim Walsh's bill might do for privacy and for the gun owners?
Well, obviously, those bills have not appeared before either of us in any of our committees, so we'll do some work to find out what specifically they're discussing. I think we have to be a bit cognizant of what the voters just did with the passage of an initiative, and if the legislature does anything too overreaching, I think that may upset some of the voters, especially in our district. I would say I am a little bit familiar with Representative Walsh's bill, and it does provide some additional privacy to gun owners, keeping them off the statewide database. So we'll look at that too, but it'll be interesting. I think that there is a fine line between what voters tell us they want and what we actually will achieve here in the legislature.
One other thing that happened was that the fix to the 940 that the House took care of last week, the Senate did this week. And so it is going to the governor, and the signing should be on Monday. So that is good that that's behind us, and that's will be on the book shortly as a new law.
And Keith, could you tell us a little bit more about 940? That is the use of force. That was a predetermined change that the legislature had agreed to. So that is the use of force we're talking about.
Yes, it is. And it provided more certainty for the law enforcement officers. It clarified about the rendering of first aid. And it just cleaned up some of the more, I guess, elements of it that really left the law enforcement officer really hanging as far as making some of the judgments for the deadly force and when to exert it and not.
Well, that is terrific news. That needed to be fixed. It was a pretty poorly written bill to start with, the initiative side, which happens all too often. All right, gentlemen, well, I got to tell you, the news stories that were hottest on social media this week were all about hairstylists going crazy in Olympia and really taking on the government. Of course, Karen Kaiser was trying to remove the independent contractor status so these folks couldn't rent their own chairs. Tell us a little bit about what happened and what the reaction was from the caucus down there.
Well, I think it's really important to recognize for folks back home that this moves well beyond just hairstylists. We're talking about potential for physicians, for truck drivers, for any independent contractor. And if you think about how much independent contractors actually delivery folks, these are folks that are involved in all of our lives on a daily basis. And if we disrupt that, it has far-ranging impacts. Our caucus is pretty much united behind the keeping of this independent contractor status. The hairstylists are very clear they want to keep it from all over the state. I've never seen an organization move so quickly or be so well organized. These hairstylists were in force on Monday here at the Capitol.
And it really speaks to the heart of the small business owner and the independent entrepreneur. And really, small business is what really sustains the 12th district.
Well, I know from my years on the Labor Committee, this is an ongoing attack, and they tried it against FedEx. That was a little too big to handle, and now they're moving down the line a little bit, trying to find a way to get that camel's nose under the tent. All right, gentlemen, it's been kind of an exciting week. We're going to wrap it up. Any last comments for the folks out here in the 12th district?
Well, I would say that I really have appreciated the visits from people from home. We had some police officers from Wenatchee, there were firefighters, wheat growers, all across the spectrum, public employee, the retirees, there were the health people, like I say, just a complete variety of people. But it's great to have those people make that commitment to come to Olympia, share their concerns, and help us understand better what impacts them through the legislation.
Absolutely. We're very fortunate to have an engaged district. We appreciate all the time people are taking to come over here and visit with us and share their knowledge about these issues with us. It continues to be a fast pace over here, and recognizing we're about two weeks away from policy cutoff already. So we'll be seeing an incredible amount of bills and volume over the next few weeks. So we encourage folks to continue to contact us and share their wisdom on bills that are being run here in the legislature.
Well, I certainly know how busy it is at this time of the session, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, because it's important that your folks back here know what's going on, and we are growing leaps and bounds here at NCW Life. Of course, all these programs are available on demand too. So we are going to take the quick break here. We'll be back, and thanks again, gentlemen. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's a wrap for today. Our state legislators are very busy. This is a time when things are going to approach a crunch very quickly. It's surprising how fast things go over there, but we are approaching the bill cutoff, and there are an awful lot of bills to be heard and to be moved. And then they'll be going out to the floor. It'll get very serious with the floor debates. We'll start to see the arguments, and we'll start to see what bills are flying and which bills are dying, and we go to the next process. So that's coming up in the next few weeks. We'll be there during the whole time. All right, last week I had a personal note on the New York abortion situation. This week I have one that's a little more political. I think a lot of you are very concerned that your parties are leaving you. The average Kennedy Democrat out there must be stunned when they see things like this abortion bill. I think most Democrats are pretty reasonable, and I think that they do not always appreciate this far move to the left. I'm hearing it from more and more that are very concerned about the party getting so far left. And on the other hand, they just don't feel comfortable with the Republican Party and some of the things that they've done, some of the things that the positions they've taken. Well, I can tell you there's a lot of folks on both sides that feel that way, and I may be one of them myself. I haven't been very impressed with the Republican Party over the last few years. I think the state folks have done a reasonable job. I was part of that team, and I think we did okay. But at the federal level, we're not getting anything done on either side. The Republicans are not getting it done. The Democrats are not getting it done. Congress is a disaster. The president's trying to do what he can, but he's not got much to work with. Is there a viable third party? Is there a viable alternative? Is there something else coming down the pipe? You know, old Howard Schultz might have something going on here. There may be an opening. I don't think it's independent. I don't think that's what it's about, but I think it's a better way of approaching politics. Stay tuned. Might be kind of fun to see what happens. Don't forget, all these shows are available on demand. If you missed this or want to go back and see the last few weeks, you can find them at ncwlife.com. We'll be here every week from Olympia and with the news from around the world. This is Kerry Kandata. This is the 12th District in session. We'll see you next week.